Now it's time to take a break from learning and put together a quick app to apply the concepts we've just learned. We're going to go ahead and do this inside of our funky unit converter, so I'm going to go ahead and close my console. I'm also going to go ahead and remove the NSLog statements I previously wrote. And I'm also going to go ahead and go over to my storyboard. And the reason I remove my NSLog statements are we just want to focus only on what's going on in our view. I'll go ahead and put them into the project that you'll be able to download. But for now, we're going to focus on updating our storyboard and using some of the integer and float elements that we've learned about in our previous lessons. So let's go ahead and first make sure that we have the iPhone 4-inch simulator selected from our top area over here. And that's because our screen defaults to the iPhone 4, or Retina 4-inch screen. And that's what we're going to be using going forward because based on the iPhone 5S and 5C, this is the size screen that Apple's going to be moving more and more towards in the future. We're going to go ahead and add some view objects to our storyboard view right here. And we're going to go ahead and first we're going to add a label to our project. So you can drag it into the upper left-hand corner here. I can add a text field. And I'm going to go ahead and move that kind of to the middle here. And I'm going to go ahead and add a button. So we're going to go ahead and drag that in. I'm going to center this up. And I'm going to go ahead and add one more label. And one of these labels will make static and the other one will make dynamic. So I'm going to go ahead and drag this to the middle. And I'm going to change my left label's text. And we're going to say number of football fields. And I'm also going to have to go ahead and adjust the size of this font, make this smaller so it fits nicely. I don't want to make it too small. I can move my other label, or I can actually shrink it in this case so they fit nicely next to each other. And I'm also going to go into my text field and add placeholder text, and I'm going to write insert number of bills here. Or let's say write number of bills here. So we see that now we have our four UI elements set up properly, and I want to go ahead now and hook everything up. So holding down the Alt key, I'm going to press on ccViewController.h so I can bring up the related header file or the view controller that manages this view. And I can drag this a little bit to the right so I have a little bit more space so I can see my full view here. And I'm going to first hook up my label. So holding down the control key, I can drag from my label into my header file. And we're going to make sure that it's an outlet. And we're going to give it the name number of bills label. Notice that we're using camel case. I'm going to give it the type UI label, and the storage type is going to be strong, and I can go ahead and press connect. Next, I'm going to hook up my text field, so I can select it and control drag to my header file, and I can name this number of bills text field. And I'm actually going to update one more element on my view here, so I'm going to double click into my button. And we're going to say convert value. And I'm going to go ahead and recenter this again. And I'm also going to hold down the control key and drag from my button into my header file. And we're going to call this method convert units. Now, before I hit connect, I'm going to make sure that my connection type is an action because when I press my button, I want some action to occur. My type, I can make it a UI button. And the event type, which is how my button reacts to touches, is going to be touch up inside, and its argument can be sender. So I can go ahead and press connect. And we see here that we have IB outlets for our view objects, where we're just updating and gathering information from our view. And we have an IB action for when I tap on my button, I want a certain action or set of logic to occur. So great, we have everything properly hooked up. And you might be saying, well, what are we going to do with all of these different view objects? What is the end goal here? Well, imagine if you were filthy rich and stacked dollars on top of themselves. How many football fields would that stretch to? we're going to convert dollars to football fields. So just a little background here. Each bill is 1 millimeter in height, and a football field's length is 91.44 meters. And not to bore you with math too much, but the conversion is 91,440 bills per football field. So we're going to convert the number of bills, and we're going to divide that by 91,440, which is the number of bills it takes to reach the length of a football field. And we're going to display this information on our number of bills label. We have two additional things we need to update on our view before we get started on our application. Go ahead and remove the text from your label. So I double clicked it and I just pressed delete to remove the text. You want to make sure that you're not deleting your label completely though. And the way we can confirm that is by looking at your scene. We see that I have access to all of the objects or view objects that are sitting on my view. So I have my label, I have a round style text field, I have a button, and I have another label. We want to make sure that they're all here to make sure that we didn't accidentally delete any objects or view objects. There's one other change we need to make, and that's we want to select our text field, and we're going to go over to the right here and we're going to make sure that our attributes inspector is open. So this is the fourth element from the left. And we're going to go ahead and change the keyboard to a number pad because we only want to be able to enter numbers in for the number of bills. We don't want the user to be able to enter text in. Let's go ahead now and go to ccviewcontrol.m. So I'm going to go to single view first. I'm going to get rid of my assistant editor. And then I can press on ccviewcontrol.m. And we're going to be running all of our code inside of the convert units method, which is down here. So just like view did loaded up and all of the logic inside of it was evaluated because our view did load onto our screen, everything inside of this set of curly braces for the convert units method evaluates when we press our button. So that makes sense. When we press our button, we want to convert the number in our text field to the number of football fields. So let's go ahead and start writing some code. The first line we need to write of our code is we need to first give it a type. We're going to say float. We're going to say number of bills, and we're going to set this equal to, well, where do we get this information from? Well, we get it from our text field, so we're going to say self.number of bills text field, and before we've accessed the property text, so this is the way we get the information that it's currently in our text field, but there's one little problem, and that's the text property of our text field returns a string. Strings are not floats, and we just said that we want to get a float for the number of bills that we're entering in our text field. So how do we do this? Well, we have to convert our string to a float. We have to convert this set of characters to a number. Luckily, strings have a method whose name is float value that allows us to convert a string to a float. So how do I call this method? Well, I have to add a left bracket before my text field, and I'm going to add a space, and I'm going to do what's called a method call, which will convert the string to a float. So it's converting this set of code, or this bit of characters, which returns a string, and we call the method float value on it, and it changes it to a float. So now we have a number of bills, which is the float value of the text in our text field. Next, we need to do our logic, so we're going to write float number of football fields. And we're going to set that equal to the number of bills that we enter into the text field, and we're going to divide that number by 91,440. So here we create a new float called number of fields, and we set its value equal to the total number of bills divided by the total number of bills in a football field. Finally, we need to update our label to display this number. So we can access our label, so we can write self.number of bills label, and before we've accessed the text property of a label to update the information on our label, we're going to set that equal to, well, we need to set it equal to the number of football fields, but just like we had to do earlier, which was convert our string to a float, we have to convert our float to a string. So how do we do that? Well, we have to do a method call again. So I'm going to add a left bracket, and I'm going to write add a string because I need to create a string, and we're going to type string with format, and we're going to use what's called a class method, and we'll talk more about class methods in a future video. But what this takes is a format string, much like we've seen in NSLog. So I can do @quote %f, which is a token. And what does a token expect? Well, it expects an argument. In this case, we're going to pass it the number of football fields. I'm going to add a right bracket and a semicolon. And now we're going to be able to update our label with the correct number of football fields. So I can go ahead and run my application. And when this thing loads up, there we go, I'm going to be able to go ahead and enter a number of bills here. So let's say I have 50,000 bills. How many football fields is that? Well, that's 0.54 football fields. And if I were to go ahead and enter the US national debt, which is a huge number, you can look it up online, but it's something like 16,951 billion, and we'll just add a bunch of zeros after this. We don't need the exact number. And this is, well, this number is so big it's not even showing up on our label. So we have one little thing that we can fix. These dots say to us that the number is too big to display. The label's running out of space. So if I go back to my storyboard, I can shift over this label a little bit, make this a little bit smaller, and I can enlarge this label so it has a little bit more space. I can also go ahead and reduce the font a little bit. And now when I run my application, I'm going to go ahead and enter the US national debt in again. So we can say 16,951 billion, and we'll say 123, 123, 123. And now we see that we get the full nice number that prints out for us.